Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Vizsla Silver, chatting with Mike Konnert. Mike is the president and CEO of Vizsla Silver. Company is traded on the TSX and the NYSE under the symbol VZLA. Now, Mike, thanks for taking some time to come on the show and more or less discuss the most recent news release that outlined a temporary pause in fieldwork at the Panuco Project. Look, at this time, exploration drilling was underway, test mining was underway, but on April 4th, you did announce, again, this temporary pause due to security concerns. There's not a whole lot of news in that news release. So, Mike, give us a lay of the land here. What's happening around this Panuco project, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, basically out of an abundance of caution, we decided to shut down work on the project, not because of anything specific to the project itself, but really just the roads around there. We saw an increase of traffic with some criminal elements and also military. And we determined through our, consulting with our security team that it was safest to avoid travel on the roads at the time and avoid any type of potential wrong place, wrong time for our employees. And, we're very sensitive to, the safety of the team, and we just wanted to make sure that everyone felt secure. Of course, this is not a common thing here. It hasn't really happened before at the project, and we don't expect it to last very long. We don't expect it to be indicative of anything going forward. It seems to me that the military Mexico is clamping down on these criminal elements, and likely this will result in a much safer environment for us to operate in. And again, we've operated over these past years with very minimal issues, and I suspect that this will be really just a flash in the pan, and we'll be back at work very shortly here, and very excited to follow up on a lot of the great work that we've been doing.
So, in terms of timelines, then, does this push back anything that's coming in terms of, I guess, drilling's paused, but you have drill core at the assay labs, the test mining components, any slowdown on any news front that we should be aware of?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say this has disturbed any of our critical path items, and I think we'll probably should have some meaningful news out that I think the market should like in the near future as well. So I'm not too worried about, disturbance of news flow here. I think we'll be back on track and following up on those great drill holes that we've had and the test mine, which continues to make great progress. So just, a small blip in the road here.
Okay, let's talk about some of the recent news then before this temporary pause in field work, starting with drilling. You had some drill results. March 31st, it was a new discovery at the La Pipa target. It's about 6 kilometers northeast of the Copala resource area. Figure 1 in that news release really shows where this target was in this one drill hole, AM 2590. Some high grade silver results. Mike, take us through this discovery. It's part of the fully funded program that you're going through, but what can you give us in terms of more color on this La Pipa target?
Well, it's very exciting for us. And, the vision here is really to go from Project 1, which we have in the west, of course, which has over 220 million ounces in M&I, driving forward, and probably the best study that I've seen in the last decade for a mining project is precious metals mining project. So we have that in hand. We're driving that forward very rapidly and looking towards production in 2027 with that project. But we want to demonstrate that this district is a true district. And what that means is it has multiple centers of mass, multiple centers of potential production. And La Pipa, this new discovery here in the Animus Trend, which is about 6 kilometers as the crow flies away from Project 1, I think could very well be that. And, we're going to continue to drill here. The first kind of discovery hole here was very encouraging. And I think that it's likely that there's going to be other centers of mass like this throughout the district. And that's all part of our exploration this year. In addition to that, we're doing ground EM. So we're going to be honing in on new targets throughout the district. And, as we drive Project 1 into production, I suspect that we're going to see a lot of really exciting exploration success throughout the rest of the project. And then of course, we have the San Enrique concessions to the south and Dara to the north. So there's a heck of a lot more for us to explore just in this district alone here.
So this is just one drill hole, but it's clearly a discovery hole. Can you give us some more insights on how much additional drilling had been completed in this area that you're awaiting results for?
Yeah, there's a little bit more at the lab there, but I'm really excited, looking forward to when we can get back there with, full strength with the drill rig and keep turning and seeing what else lies beneath there. So, it's early days, I should say, but, we're going to continue to explore this.
What about some of these other targets? This drill program is minimum of 10,000 meters. That sounds like it is focused on new discoveries. You outlined 5 high priority target areas. What other drilling has been done on these other target areas?
Yes, we've done some pretty good work down there at San Dimas Camellia, but it's a bit complex, the geology. So we're interpreting that. And what's good about this slowdown is that it gives our team a chance to, take a break from the field and really start to interpret some of these results and hone in on where the next area is to target. So we've had some, I would say some early stage success, throughout our other targets through exploration, but La Pipa has been, the one that I think has risen to the top right now. But that's not to say that these other targets won't deliver in the future. And of course, it's a bit of an iterative process where we test a target, we get more information through our groundwork, prospecting, even the ground EM that's coming shortly. And these targets can be reordered and priorities can shift, and that's just what the advent of new information. And so, this is a district that we consolidated for the very first time in modern history. We got to the discoveries pretty early at Napoleon, and then stumbled upon that blind discovery at Copala, and then we were off to the races there. And so we really haven't explored or scratched the surface of the rest of this district. I would consider it immature in terms of exploration, and there's still so much more for us to explore. So the targets that we have been drilling, I think none of them have been killed at all. There's still a lot of potential at all of them, but it's early days still.
One trend that I've noticed, a lot of the drilling that's happened is around some old mine workings. Same with this new discovery. It says it's below some historic mine workings. What can you tell us? Any more information about what the mining was like in this area?
Well, Animus actually had the most significant historic mining in the district. It was an area where we estimate probably about 100 million ounces of silver equivalent have been extracted over about 8 large ore chutes. And in between that, there really hasn't been any mining, and there has been basically very minimal exploration in that area as well. So we think it's quite fertile. We suspect that if there's 8 ore chutes, there's probably other large ore chutes in the area. And then there's the issue of the water table, and we believe that there's probably some extension of mineralization below the water table as well. So, Animus is more advanced than other areas, and it's the dominant trend, I think, that was discovered earliest at the project and the backbone of historic production. But there's an incredible amount of old workings throughout this property. I mean, it was discovered by Francisco de Ibarra and about 500 years ago and mined pretty much steadily. This district mined pretty much steadily from subsequent to that. And so there's everything from very small superficial openings, artisanal openings, to more elaborate and significant underground workings. So we often use this historic mineralization, historic mining to vector into new mineralization. That was the same for Napoleon. Copala, essentially was due to us following up at Tajitos, which was an old mine. So it really just pays to get out there and drill. And the key thing here is that mineralization here is structurally controlled. So once you get a sense of the structures, you can step up and down along that structure and and see what might occur there in terms of mineralization. So we're using a lot of technology to help us, and we're combining new technology or modern technology with prospecting and just kind of boots on the ground. And again, I like to stress that it really is early days in terms of exploration throughout the rest of this district here. So I suspect that we're going to make many more discoveries going forward.
Approximately how much drill core is at the assay labs that you're waiting on that we could look out for news-wise?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of interesting holes, I would say, at the lab right now. But I think what we'll see is once we get back to the project here, more steady news flow and more results coming out of the lab.
Mike, let's also talk test mining. Then, look, I get a lot of questions on test mining in terms of what progress is being made. Bring us up to speed. Before this temporary pause in field work, Where was the test mining?
So the test mine has been progressing very well. And the good part about a test mine is that you're testing not only your own abilities, but the contractor abilities. You're testing the ability to plan and things like that. And so our team has had a lot of value in really just the startup of this mine. So, we did a 30 by 30 by 30 meters, so 30-meter cubed box cut, and a pretty substantial box cut. And we've completed that. And we've been into the portal already with a number of blasts. So we've made good progress. We're underground at the test mine. And I suspect that, once we get to a certain level here in the coming weeks and months, we'll be able to put out a really comprehensive update. I'd like to get some photos from underground and really demonstrate what we're doing. But it's quite impressive. I love being down there and seeing it. The team is doing a very good job of bringing it all together. And that's really thrilling. It's a lot different than seeing drill core come out of the ground. It really marks the beginning of a mining operation and our team coming together to be miners. So test mining is a big advantage to us. It allows us to decouple the risk of starting up a mine and a mill at the same time. So if you think about that, a brand new startup mine combined with a brand new startup mill, a lot of things can go wrong. Invariably, even at the best operations in the world, things will go wrong or growing pains. This allows us to really make progress underground, get down to the Copala vein early, but also get really comfortable with underground development prior to the startup of the mill.
What is the overall scale of this test mining operation then? Can you give us more insight on that aspect?
So it'll be basically about a kilometer of development, and it comes in from surface, goes down basically about 80 meters subsurface into Copala, but it comes around and does a bit of a fish hook. And that fish hook ideally we're hoping will intersect some interesting structures that we haven't drilled, but we're aware of at surface. So it's a 5x5 drive, and the team is making good progress with it.
All right, Mike, one more comment then, I guess, market wise. Look, we've talked a whole lot about the markets on this show with our different analysts, and volatility has been, well, the overriding factor, especially this week. And we saw a lot of volatility in your stock as well, especially on the back of that pause in Fieldwork and the market kind of meltdown that we saw earlier this week. However, the stock has also rebounded. Arguably, you could say that these are great buying opportunities for some of the outperforming stocks. But what do you have to say, market wise, about, again, the volatility that even your stock was susceptible to?
Yeah, I think volatility, of course, is painful when it's on the downside, but it's really exciting when it's on the upside. And a lot of times when you have more speculative companies like Vizsla, of course, we're pre-cash flow. We have an incredible asset as a foundation. You get these opportunities in pullbacks to buy high quality stocks at discount prices. And I think we saw that one of our largest shareholders was talking to us and was very bullish and was buying, I think, 1 million shares at the lows here recently. And, obviously he's quite happy to have that happen and, to have an opportunity to enter the stock and average down at these prices. In the past, when we've seen crashes like this, usually it precedes a rally in the metal prices and precious metal prices. And I think we're seeing that. Gold's up $73 today from what I can see. And, we're sitting at 3,100, 3,150 gold price. That's incredible. And so I don't see how the precious metals complex is going to come off in the situations we see at hand. And, these shocks to the system sometimes create incredible buying opportunities. So, nothing's changed from the project at our side here other than, we've had to take a small break. But, with $100 million US in the bank and the world's leading silver development project, I think this is a really incredible opportunity to look at buying the stock.
Okay, so the one other question I should ask, because in this volatility, sometimes the markets do tighten up in terms of being able to raise money. Where does the company stand cash wise?
Yeah, so we have 100 million US in the bank, and no debt, of course. We're very well funded, certainly for any of the plans that we have going forward up until that construction decision. So, we are working on project finance. That hasn't changed. This pullback or anything hasn't changed the interest that we have from project financiers. And we're making great progress with that. And that's one of our huge KPIs for this year. If you think about 2025 as a transformative year for the company. There's a feasibility study coming, which of course there's been no slowdown to that. The team is working very well on the feasibility study, and our goal is to not go backwards from the PEA into the feasibility study. That means, have consistent economics, consistent project value from PEA to feasibility study. The test mine is a huge catalyst for us and a huge de-risking project for us, and we've been making great progress there. We'll have an update on that. And then also getting to fully funded status is very important for us. So we're moving forward on that front, and very hopeful that by the end of the year, we're going to have some really positive news on how we're going to get from the $100 million in the bank right now to fully funded with minimal dilution going forward.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for taking some time here addressing what is going on in the area around the Panuco project, as well as updating us on this exploration drilling. I'll follow up with you as we see some more news, and especially when you get active again in the field. For everyone listening, if you have any follow-up questions for Mike, please email me, fleck@kereport.com. I'll get Mike to address those in future calls. Mike, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you very much, Corey. Great to catch up.